Paul, so disclosure, Paul and I are not related in any fashion, right?
Not that we know yet.
Not that I know of, right?
But if you win that lottery ticket, I think we were brothers.
My favorite uncle, my dad's best brother was Paul Smith, and he had a son named Paul Smith, and then there's also Paul Smith the third. So you're the fourth Paul Smith that I've known, first outside of my group.
Good company.
Okay, so we've got about 25 minutes together, and as Ben was describing, it's a chance for this group here to start opening up, not opening up, but start sharing verbally, if as you feel comfortable, with what some of the issues and needs are along the corridor. I'm here to kind of nudge along conversation, and Gabby is with us to take some notes. Gabby's sharing her screen, and she's got on the left side there some place for her to kind of type in things as the discussion moves along. And then we've also got some exhibits, or we can pull up Google Maps if people have some questions or concerns about something. I also have access, Gabby does too, to everything that came up in the Mentimeter. So if somebody wants to go back to that information, we can do that as well. And like Ben said, we got about 25 minutes together to talk about whatever we'd like to talk about. And then when we get to the end, we'll go back into the large group. Gabby will, as our scribe, will talk about what we've spoken about here. Anybody feels motivated to add to what Gabby has to say, you're welcome to do that too. If we were in person, we would usually try to pick a spokesperson out of this group who felt comfortable being the speaker. But in the interest of time and all the kind of the technology challenges here, we're just planning on taking care of that ourselves. If somebody's really, really interested in being the spokesperson, let's talk about it and you can be that. I'm sure Gabby will not be offended to turn some of that over. Is that right?
Of course, not a problem.
Okay. So I'm just going to stop jabbering here and see where people would like to start with issues and needs, what you think of what you've heard so far, what your experience was during the virtual forum, things like that. So I'm going to stop and let somebody else talk.
Hey guys, mind if I throw a comment out here to start with?
Sure.
Okay. Obviously, the number one reason we're all together is because of the railroad crossing on Old McHenry, and not to detract from that. But there's been some thoughts about having less traffic. And one thing when I look at this map here is one way that we could actually reduce traffic is a lot of these neighborhoods and the schools and everything are isolated from each other. If my kids could have biked down to the school, that would have been 2 less cars to the school. I can't even get to the YMCA actually without getting in a car, and I live right behind it. So somehow if that theme were in here of, connecting these neighborhoods and these points of interest, you might get both. You might reduce some of the traffic at the same time as increasing the flow. So it's just my thought.
Yeah, are you thinking like with bike paths or things like that as well, sidewalks?
Bike paths, sidewalks.
Right.
I did you guys an excellent job of pointing together those points of interest, and I think that's a good place to start where you're not just focusing on the road.
Right. Yeah, I think one thing we see on routes like these is these roads are serving multiple purposes. There's people who just enter in one area and come out the other, who are crisscrossing, trying to get to other places. But there's also a good chunk of people who are trying to get to places within the study area, whether they start there or end there. So it's that combination of those two things that makes challenges. Why do people honk their horn or get mad when somebody's a little bit slower? Like usually when it's not their neighborhood, right? Because I'm just trying to fly right on through here. When you're close to home, everybody tends to be a little more patient because it's your area.
Yeah, and I thought you were going to say there's a third bullet point, which these roads are actually barriers to getting places.
Yeah.
Can't get across the street, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, go ahead, Mark.
I agree with the connections. I definitely would like that, but that's really only a seasonal thing. I live off of Quentin, and there's a nice new bike path down by Cuba in Killdeer, and it's only usable 8-9 months a year because the snow plows bury it in ice. So these connections are good during the summer months, but in reality, I run 12 months a year and I don't see pedestrians out for only 6 months a year.
Hardcore runner, obviously, if you're running 12 months a year.
Hard, the extreme of the extreme, yes.
I assume that comment was from you and during the Mentimeter exercise. I think there was something about that, right?
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned the timing of the lights. I think that matters quite a bit. I live right there. Every time I go anywhere, the timing of the lights, you know, you get through one light and the other light's red, and that really screws up the flow. And I know the less flow, the more noise. So the noise pollution is pretty high because everyone's revving their engines going from zero, trying to get to the next light or through the next light. Or a lot of times there's accidents all over all three of those intersections because people are trying to whip through the lights.
Yeah.
And then when you whip through the light, like coming off Quentin onto Old McHenry, then there's another stoplight right away. So the timing of everything seems to be really off, and that just screws a lot of stuff up, especially at 7 to 9 in the morning and 4 to 6 at night.
Do you see that, Ryan, with or without a train coming? Like
Oh, yeah.
even when the
Yes, all the
same,
time.
Same concern. Okay.
The train just exponentially
Just makes it
throws
worse.
just everything, you know, publishing a train schedule or an app or whatever would be great, because then you could know. I mean, it's a 45-minute difference for me a lot of times, because I go down Old McHenry, and if the train's there, I have to wait 15 minutes for a train, and then I hit other traffic on for Stevenson High School, which a lot of other people do right around that same time. So if I hit a train at 8 o'clock in the morning, it takes me an hour and 15 minutes to get to work, and I work in Deerfield. So the train thing really just screws everything up. But the timing of the lights, somebody brought that up. I thought that was very relevant.
So yeah, I think Gabby, if you could note like what would we call it, coordinated signals, or signal coordination, like making sure the traffic signals are talking to each other. We would call it, in traffic engineering, we call it progression. We want to get a platoon of vehicles, be able to get through one side and all the way out the other, not have to stop every single time.
Yeah, they seem to be off. I don't know, you know, what the weight system or whatever the measurements are, but yeah, that would probably help substantially.
I see Patrice figured out how to raise her hand, so we better acknowledge Patrice.
I'll take that off now. Okay.
Or maybe you did it on accident. No, you
No,
did it. Okay.
No, I did it intentionally. It was intentional. No, I agree with that comment, definitely. I live on Heather Lane, down into the community, so I see every train, I hear every train. So, our property backs up to St. Matthews, so I have a couple concerns, but one of them was, I agree with what Ryan said, and was it Mark who spoke about that? Because my husband's an avid cyclist, and he cycles even in the winter, as long as there's no precipitation on the ground. So we're a cycling family. But my concern is on Heather Lane. If there's a train that's taking a long time, or if we've had before it stopped on the tracks for one reason or the other, I'm a prisoner in my community. You can't get out. Heather Lane and Quentin Road intersect right there. So, and then when the train is done and all the backup of cars try to get through, that's a death trap for us. Unless you're potentially turning right, you could kind of squeeze out there, because then cars just zip around right there. I'd like to see lower speed limits right in that general area, because it's a dangerous spot at certain times of day.
Does everybody know where Heather Lane is? I see
Yeah.
some nodding heads. Okay. It's that First Street South.
Yes, that's it.
McHenry
My
Lane.
house. My house is
Thanks, Gabby.
behind. I can see where St. Matthews is. So yeah, that's definitely the Heather Highlands community right there, which you highlighted.
Yeah.
And part of the problem with the speed limits is around that time, because the flow is not good. Nobody pays attention to speed limits. Everyone just
That is definitely true.
they just
All
go.
for-
We also
yeah.
walk. We also walk over to that park and take walks around there. That's definitely true.
Maybe a traffic camera like they have down on Quentin and Rand. You know,
No.
I stopped rolling through those lights because I got 5 tickets in 6 months.
Wow.
So I'm like, that changed the way that I drove around that area for sure. I know Mark doesn't want that, but
Yeah,
I'm in Killdeer and the revenue goes to Killdeer for that, but I think those are just money grabs. I think what it does is it has people stop on the yellow on a right turn. So that gets pretty ugly too.
it can get a little dangerous. Yeah,
Dangerous. So they're
overly
I'm
safe.
skeptical. Just
overly.
like talk about balancing traffic flow, and that would be the roundabout method. Is that you don't need synchronized lights if you have roundabouts, but as a cyclist, to me, roundabouts are scary. They scare the hell out of me.
Let's talk about the R word. So since Mark brought it up, roundabouts with a capital R. What are people's thoughts or experiences about roundabouts? I will say that is something we will be considering for these intersections. We don't have any answers or solutions yet. So we're curious. I'd say, let me add, like the virtual forum, most things we heard about roundabouts was don't bring them here. And I'm always curious if that's just a lack of knowledge.
Yeah, that sounds like people who've never experienced them before and don't want change. They're popping up all over. They're kind of,
Right.
they're good once you get used to them.
They're
do we
not
have
pedestrian
statistics?
friendly though.
Do we have statistics on accidents and traffic flow for roundabouts? I feel like every time I drive through a roundabout, I almost get hit 4 times. So I'm always just waiting to get crushed.
Let me give a stat on that, and then I want to make sure, see Erica and Patrice both raised their hands, but according to the studies I've seen, that roundabouts improve safety for motorists by 80%. So it probably counter to what you're saying, Ryan. Really, for 2 main reasons is we're reducing speeds because you can't fly through a roundabout at 55 miles an hour. And then the second piece is you're reducing the number of conflict points. So even though you're saying you feel like you might get hit 4 times, that 4 times is less than the 64 times that you might get hit by everybody moving from every direction.
Makes sense.
Erica, I think you had your hand up first, so I wanted to make sure you got a few seconds to comment.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention, I know it's all on our minds, but just emergency vehicles across the railroad tracks when the trains are coming, whether it's the trains are stopped or whether it's the trains are just coming through, getting emergency vehicles, whether it's fire department or police department from one side to the other. I know for a while the village was keeping one police car on each side of the tracks because you never knew when a train was coming through and we wanted to make sure that we could respond. If we were considering roundabouts, would they be single or dual lane? Do we know yet based on traffic counts?
Don't know yet.
Okay.
I think most Lake County, if not all Lake County roundabouts, are just single lane. I think there's 1 or 2 that I would call like 1.5, where like in one quadrant there would be a second lane, or what we'd call just like a bypass lane. I don't think we have any multi-lane roundabouts yet in Lake County. The numbers I've seen, some of these intersections you need to be looking at multi-lane roundabouts, and we talked about people's fear of roundabouts. Multi-lane roundabouts is taking it to a whole nother level of concern, but they do make traffic very safe, but they're not always the right fit either. So it'll be something we'll be looking at. Did you have anything else, Erica, before I think Patrice was next? Okay, Patrice.
I thought Dean was next because I don't think he's had a chance to speak yet.
Okay, well, let's go with Dean.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to make a comment as we look at roundabouts, the big yellow buses need a lot more space. And I just want us to make sure that we keep that in mind. I know there's some studies out of Wisconsin that claim that is actually a very powerful and positive thing around schools. But I personally haven't been in a district where we've had it, other than the fact that I know we need to keep some consideration on that. I'm sure there's a lot of research that you guys have on that. I just wanted to note that. So
Mark mentioned they don't seem to be very friendly with pedestrians and bicyclists. So I think that is the knack or one of the negatives out there in roundabouts. I will add, in case you're not familiar with a roundabout, there's if you kind of work from the middle out, in the very middle is usually a landscaped median area. Sometimes they're raised up with some vegetation, sometimes they're just flat. Surrounding that median area would be what we call a truck apron. So it's a hard surface. It's usually like brick pavers, and that's the area where large trucks, emergency vehicles, school buses can use in order to get around the circle. And then as you move around out from the truck apron, then you have like that 20-foot paved lane or 18-foot paved lane where most vehicles go. And really the trucks and the buses, the large vehicles are using both the lane and the truck apron. So that's kind of how we get around that as traffic engineers to make sure there is enough room for larger vehicles. But for peds and bicyclists, it's just not the same. You're actually introducing maybe even more conflict points when you're a bike, and no one is stopping. It's all yields. So it can be a little more challenging, whereas a pedestrian or bicycle, you got to make sure that person actually sees you. And if you don't have a red light to your right to help you out, you're kind of on your own. But yeah, there's studies both ways that they work in school settings. They do or they don't. And that's something if we'll probably be getting more into in the future to look at things. But yeah, good discussion. It's good, helpful for us to hear what people are experiencing with those. I saw Mark nodding his head a few times. Dean, just maybe a little bit more on your perspective. So we have 2 schools at the Abbey Glen end of Old McHenry Road, at least at the end of our study area. One
Right.
building, two schools.
Yeah.
And what's your thoughts, or what do you hear about from parents, about accessibility for walking or bicyclists? Would that be a big thing to make sure that we're considering for access to the school?
Obviously, the more opportunity we
mentioned
have
that.
for folks to be able to walk, it's ideal. But I will say that obviously crossing over, I don't know how many families do that. I'm a little bit newer to the district, so I haven't had that. My hope was that I'd be able to kind of find out what kind of conversations we're having so I can go back and dig in a little further. But obviously, whatever we can have as far as opportunity for students to walk to school, it's better. We don't transport inside of 1.5 miles. So anyone who is nearby is a walker, or they're getting in their car with their parents and they're being dropped off. So it's more about, in most cases, it's going to be more about parental traffic in and around those. So going back to those schedules and timing the lights, if we can make sure that our flow is very good while we're having students, coming and being dropped off for the big yellow buses, that's ideal. I don't know if that gives you what you were hoping to gather, but
Patrice, I forgot to circle back with you.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, the comment on the roundabout, it actually is kind of concerning because of the bikers and pedestrians, but also that Hawthorne Works Park there. If there was a roundabout, I don't perceive there ever really being a slowdown, unless it's a very off time. And we have that Hawthorne Works Park there with all kinds of events. We have fireworks. We have just a variety of events over there, Christmas events, holiday events, sports for kids. So we see a lot of that, kids riding their bikes over there. So as much as I think a roundabout has some advantages, I'm not sure that I think it could be too much volume for that location. And
I've heard, we met with Doug earlier, and I think Doug is part of our group here. There he is. Just how many people, like at certain events at the community park on the south side in the church's parking lot,
they park in our,
and walk across. Yeah.
They park in our neighborhood, and we have an issue with that as well. People parking on our grass and all kinds of stuff like that. So
because of the fireworks and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Or just different events.
Yeah.
Erica, did you have something else to add in here?
Yeah, I was just feeling bad for drainage. So I think you've already heard about all of the drainage type issues through the quarter. So I just wanted to say that out loud. Those are all documented somewhere, right? I don't have to go through them all with you.
You can if you really want to. Maybe for this group, maybe to hear the importance of that in this corridor. I think drainage sometimes, as a engineer to engineer, things people don't like to think about unless it's a problem that they see every day.
Yeah, so then I'll just make a comment that in general, we know the corridor pretty well, and the village, as a public works director in the village, I've pretty much identified all the places where water isn't draining under Midlothian, or it's not draining under Old McHenry, or the various issues that we have throughout town. So within the corridor. So I just want to say that out loud, that those are things that we've identified and spoken with the team about in the previous meeting.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt?
Yes, Doug.
If I could share a couple comments from
Yeah.
our school families and our church families, and probably from the village too. When we have the 4 lanes and we have the center turn lane, exiting and entering our property becomes very dangerous. And from the other side of the road, when public transportation is coming out, it's difficult too. So that congestion that we get between 6:30 and 9:30 in the morning, and then picks up about 2:30 to 6 o'clock at night, safety-wise, is not a good situation for our people who are attending functions, both public and church and school activities at St. Matthew. And I've sat there trying to get out myself and look at Erica's people coming from the village barn, and we play the waiting game to see who's going to go first. So that's one thing that people have came and talked to me that they wanted shared. It's just that safety of the egress or entryway into the properties.
Yeah, you know, when we did our crash studies that were completed, and we shared some of that information during the virtual forum, you know, that there's definite safety concerns in front of St. Matthew's Church and also with the Hawthorne Garden Center. Just a lot of ingress and egress, like you said, all kind of concentrated in one place. I think it was Ryan or somebody else had mentioned it. You get that kind of inbuilt rage when the gates are down and then people are just trying to zip through here because I got to pick up my kid from school, or I got to get to this, or I got to get to work. And that's that can be a dangerous mix. And that's what we see with the crash history out there. Ben just gave us a little message that, so we got about 3 minutes left. So I'm always worried in these things, like we're going to stare at each other for 25 minutes. So I'm really glad that we had a nice, good conversation going. So Gabby's been taking some notes here. So is there anything else before we do close up that people would like to put in? Yeah, Doug.
Matt, just a comment. Will the utility companies be working in cooperation with public transportation, possibly for going underground with utilities instead of overground? Is that part of the plan?
I think the best thing for me to say there is not specifically part of the plan. However, when you look at utilities that need to get relocated because of a new grade separation, well, they're going to have to move anyway, right? So it's either going under or consideration for going underground. Now that cost then is sometimes something the project has to bear versus the utility company bearing that cost. So it's something that I would say would be considered, but it's going to have to be, it can be very costly.
Sure.
And it'll be probably participation. Go ahead.
We already have the aqua water line that goes in front on the south side of Old McHenry Road. So there's all different kinds of utilities in that path on that side of the road. Yeah,
you know, and I think when you remove, well, we have the ComEd high tension lines, right? So that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about burying utilities. We'd be talking about more of your local utility poles. You know, when those things get moved out of the way or get buried, it really changes the look or context of the communities. It really, I think, puts a better look. It certainly takes away from rural, but sometimes people like it better not seeing all those poles all over the place.
Could I add the thought of pedestrian tunnels as crossing? Because I think the Forest Preserve has done a great job around the Lakewood Forest Preserve of allowing access to the other side of Fairfield or the other side of 176 using that method. And that I think is for people that are staying local with like the fireworks and stuff like that. I think that's a good solution. It obviously doesn't do any help for bikers, but it is nice for